Now that Elizabeth Warren is officially running for president, at least in a exploratory committee fashion, there's going to be more scrutiny around her positions. So on domestic policy, like economic policy, I think Elizabeth Warren is fantastic. But on foreign policy, there's been a lot of questions because she has sort of been all over the place in terms of her positions, and rarely has she really spoken up on those positions. But she was on Rachel Maddow's show on MSNBC and was asked about her positions regarding Syria and Afghanistan. Watch.
I wanted to ask you about the president's recent decision to pull U.S. troops out of Syria. I know that you voted against supporting Syrian rebels with arms and training. And now that the president made this decision the way he made it, do you agree with him?
So I think it is right to get our troops out of Syria. And let me add, I think it's right to get our troops out of Afghanistan. I think that everybody who keeps saying, no, we can't do that in the defense establishment needs to explain what they think winning in those wars look like and where the metrics are. We're now 17 years in Afghanistan, and we control, that the government controls less than 60% of all the land. It doesn't have the support of the people. The heroin trafficking is up. There are multiple groups that are terrorist groups throughout Afghanistan. Lots of different problems in Afghanistan. And what seems to be the answer from the foreign policy establishment? Stay forever. That is not a policy. We can't do that. Now, having said that, when you withdraw, you got to withdraw as part of a plan. You got to know what you're trying to accomplish throughout the Middle East, and the pieces need to be coordinated, and they need to be coordinated not just in our activities, but this is why we need allies. This is why we build alliances.
Are you troubled by the nature of the president's process around
Are
the
you
Syria
asking
decision?
me whether or not I think foreign policy ought to be conducted by tweet? The answer is no, it should not. We actually need to plan this out and talk about with our allies how we ensure more safety and stability in the region. But the idea that the way we're going to do that is just to continue to keep troops and more troops forever and ever and ever in that part of the world, it is not working. And pretending that somehow in the future it is going to work by some unmeasured version of it, it's a form of fantasy that we simply can't afford to continue to engage in.
So I was actually pleasantly surprised by Elizabeth Warren's response here. So she has been on the Armed Services Committee, and she even voted for an increase in military spending, which made me think that would be more hawkish on these issues. But she pushed back against what she calls the foreign policy establishment, which is the military-industrial complex. She has pushed back against endless war. She, in many ways, has the same position that Bernie Sanders and even Noam Chomsky have in terms of, yes, we should be pulling out of these wars, but in terms of, say, Syria, for example, be aware of our allies in the region, like the Kurds, and the effect that it'll have on them in terms of how we pull out. And should we have any presence there, in terms of Noam Chomsky's position, he thinks there should be at least some presence there to deter an attack from Turkey on the Kurds. But again, this is the bigger picture here is that, yes, Elizabeth Warren, like Bernie Sanders, is against endless war and wants to pull troops out of these regions across the world. So I think that's great. So her only issue here with the way Trump is doing it is the process. And I completely agree. The process shouldn't be done by tweet. There should be an actual process in place, a clear process that the allies, whether or regardless of whatever region it is, that your allies are aware of, and that you are able to still maybe in some instances have some sort of small presence in a region like in Syria to protect the Kurds against an attack from Turkey. Now, as I said, Noam Chomsky has a similar position, but on Israel-Palestine, so this is where, I mean, there wasn't a question about Israel-Palestine. This is where Elizabeth Warren has been a little more questionable on her position. So there is this recent reporting from Middle East Eye. Says Elizabeth Warren 2020, where does progressive senators stand on Palestine? In 2014, Warren supported Israel's war on Gaza, but more recently, she has questioned U.S. policies regarding the conflict. So this is where a lot of the questions around Elizabeth Warren and her foreign policy comes from. The fact that she supported Israel's war on Gaza, despite all the evidence that they were committing war crimes, even according to the UN. Now, she has sort of walked that back recently. So in April, this reported from The Intercept, as most Democrats stay silent, Elizabeth Warren calls on Israel to exercise restraint against Palestinian protesters. So she has been more vocal more recently, pushing back against the defense establishment and their position on Israel-Palestine. So there is clearly some light here at the end of the tunnel that appeared to be a long, dark tunnel for endless war that Warren may have adopted. But I think it's clear now that she is at least open to adopting more progressive positions, and the fact that she is pushing back against endless war and the defense establishment, I think, is clearly a great sign.